everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a Palmetto Tech Bridge webinar. We try to do about 1 or 2 a month. And today our guest host is Earl Gregorich with the SBDC. He is the area manager for Greenville, and that's the Small Business Development Center. So Earl, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited about this topic. Cyber is one of the Palmetto Tech Bridge's main 4 focus areas. So I'm definitely excited to learn a little bit more about it. And I know a lot of our partners and audience are as well. So I will let you take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Happy to be with everybody today. We are a small group today, so please interject, ask your questions. So we have the chat box open, and we'll make sure that we get as many of your questions answered as possible. And there'll probably be a little bit of time after the fact for any questions that maybe fall outside the information being covered on the slides. So as I was introduced there, I am the area manager of the Greenville Small Business Development Center. Office is right here close to downtown Greenville. I do operate as part of the Clemson region of the SBDC. We have an office in Greenville, an office in Spartanburg, and along with mine here in Greenville, we also have one Greenwood and on Clemson's campus. So we're a group that's part of the 20 offices that are located around the state. We do offer small business consulting, training, and various content to assist small businesses in startup, growth, and all the way through exit strategies if necessary. So basically, if it's a small business challenge, we're here to help. As far as my background with regards to cybersecurity, I'm an entrepreneur 3 times over. I'm very much a generalist when it comes to entrepreneurship and the skills involved with running a business. But when it comes to IT, I have a background in IT. I was a director of a company you see there for several years in retail wholesale. And I currently serve as the chair of the technology committee for the SBDC here in South Carolina. And I'm the co-chair of the National Cybersecurity Task Force for the ASBDC, which is our national organization in support of all SBDCs across the United States. So I don't say that to say I know it all, but I do come at you with a little bit of experience in these topics and travel the circles quite a bit. So we'll get started on our material for today. What you may see on several of the slides, you may see the North Star logo on there. That simply is the branding that we use on a national basis for all things cybersecurity that we teach or produce to distribute to small businesses and our consultants across the United States. So the North Star brand is based on a collection of all the frameworks out there that are used in the public and private sector. This is not grassroots creative thinking by a bunch of consultants with a little bit of knowledge. No, this is based on actual standards that are put forth by government entities, by think tanks with regards to cybersecurity. You see on the left there, NIST and CMMC and so on. So we just say that so that you understand that we're not just giving you what we think. We are actually converting what the standards are in the public and private sector into language that most small businesses can work with. The primary area is the CMMC model, the cybersecurity maturity model. We drop the C off the end of the North Star because we do not get involved in direct certification, but we do follow the 6 domains covered by the CMMC, which is based on NIST as well. So we're going to cover those 6 domains immediately here, and then move into some of the easier ways to communicate this to small businesses. So one of the first domains that we talk about is access control. It's one of the ones that most people can relate to because we all have to gain access to something online, something at work, some device that we carry with us. So everybody that we talk to understands what we mean when we say access control. Access control is the basically establishing some type of a requirement to access the systems that need to be protected. So as a small business, you may have a point of sale system, you may have a customer relationship management system or CRM system. Those are things that would require that you limit the access to only those who are required. So when we say access control, it's the internal systems, the external systems that you have. If there's any kind of remote access, which is a big thing now with remote work, there needs to be some controls put on that such that only the folks that should have access to the data behind those systems can gain access to it. And we'll talk more in depth with about some of the ways that we can accomplish that here in a few slides. Next control is the identification and authentication process. So not only are we limiting access, we need to make sure that the people with access are the proper people, that we have checked the identity of the users on the systems as they're coming in. We want to make sure that we're tracking those users across the systems as they're using them. So that would require that we have the ability to see what logins are associated with what systems within our business. We want to make sure that we are authenticating folks so that they have access to the right areas of the systems as well. It's one thing to allow somebody to come in to say your accounting system. It's another thing to allow someone to be able to access the inventory and supplier side versus say the HR and the payroll side. Someone working the warehouse most likely does not need access to the to the payroll systems and vice versa. So that authentication to know who it is and granting them access to the proper areas of the system is also a very big part of access control and identification and authentication. One thing we hear a lot about these days is also the multi-factor authentication. One thing I can't stress enough is if you have any system that is requiring some form of a login, it should have some form of multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is that process that most of us are familiar with, in that you may log into say a computer or a mobile device, but yet you'll have to have a second device or some secondary means of contact so that you can synchronize a code or a timed link or something along those lines to prove that you are actually the individual that you say you are. So if there's any type of login request, it should really be followed up with multi-factor authentication, or MFA as we refer to it. It's just the safe thing to do these days. Media protection, one of the next domains that we talk about under CMMC. This includes both digital and non-digital. A lot of folks who assume media is just digital fall short of many of the requirements for cybersecurity. It's a common error. When you think cyber, you think digital, but the fact of the matter is, digital is data. Data can come in many forms and be stored in many ways. So when we talk about media protection, we're talking about protecting access to all things that contain or use data. So this might include things like flash drives, hard drives, mobile devices, paper laying on a desk, reports in notebooks on shelves, filing cabinets with data in it as well. All of that is considered media, and all of that should be protected. We all, I'm sure, can point to instances where we know there's a piece of paper somewhere that can help me get a little bit further into a system that might be on the computer on my desk. So protecting all forms of media is very, very important. Part of that protection would also include making sure that anytime data is moved about, or in some cases disposed of, it's disposed of properly. Anytime we move data around, we hope that it's encrypted or in some format where if someone were to get access to that, they couldn't just instantly use it. It would require some form of a key, some form of a translation in order to be used. If we are disposing of items, it's important that we make sure that those items we're disposing of do not have any critical data on them. A couple of items that come to mind there would be a printer or a copier. Many printers and copiers have hard drives on them. And if you just simply have a copier that is not working and you roll it out the back door and into the dumpster, chances are everything that's been copied on that machine, at least for a period of time, is still resides on that hard drive. And now anyone who has access to that machine can now run off with that data, use it however they please. So just be aware that protecting the media does not always mean protecting what you have on the computer screen in front of you. It can go further than that. Physical protection. This is another area that most of our small businesses can relate directly to. This is a situation where we're talking about simple things like door locks and access to cabinets and the hardware that may be associated with operating the business or the network within that business. We need to make sure that things are locked up. It sounds simple enough, but if you're walking about your office, make observation when somebody leaves their office and they're going to be gone from the presence of their computer. They're leaving data, papers, whatever, reports on their desk. Do they just simply walk out and leave it there? When you close down for the evening, take a sweep of the office, see who left their computers on, see who left their drawers of their desk unlocked, see who left the door of their office open with reports or a laptop laying there or a thumb drive sitting on the desk. This is the type of things that we're talking about when we say physical protection. Many small businesses will have their equipment, their hardware, say their router or their printers or fax machines and the like, may be out in public areas. It's very common that the router is stuffed up under the counter next to the point of sale system, fully accessible by anybody who may walk by. So just checking to make sure that these types of things are secured in some way that they cannot be easily accessed or in some cases carried away. So physical protection is very important. System and communication, one of the other domains. This is where we're going to talk about the various controls to protect the stored data and the data in transit. I mentioned the fact that we should have things encrypted. We're going to talk about some of the items that are larger risks, and we're going to talk about why encryption is important for that. Also creating fail-safes and hurdles for the hackers to get around is another way to protect system and communication. If you can somehow segregate data and its associated systems into tiers or into different servers to where they're not all contained within one computer or one network, that will also mitigate some of the risk. It'll slow down an attack, and in some cases it will allow you to stop the spread of, say, a malware attack on your systems. So an example of that might be your voicemail systems and the like may reside on a computer that is on a network, but that the payroll systems are not also connected to that same network. So if someone were to hack into your company through, say, the voicemail system, they would not have instant access to the payroll system because they were on the same machine. associated on the same network. So keeping networks disassociated would be a good practice as well. Of course, using firewalls and monitoring who's coming and going through the various network access points, limiting the number of access points, all of those are also good practices when it comes to systems and communications. Systems and information integrity. This is basically, we're talking about how do we double check to make sure that the data that we have is staying uncorrupted. We have the ability to detect whether or not we are under attack. We have the ability to then react in a timely manner. This is an area that probably is one of the more challenging areas for small businesses because we don't have the complexity that some of the larger companies with in-house IT capabilities might have. It would be unusual for a small business owner to say, sit down and monitor who logged into their systems for the day, how long were they in there, what data did they actually access, did they download something, did they print off an unusual report that maybe they shouldn't necessarily have need of, or something along those lines. Most small business owners, A, don't have that capability, B, don't have the time to go in and check it if they do have it. So it's very important that we stress that if this can be automated, in some cases, maybe even have a third party, an external group monitor this for a small business might be an option. So we realize that this particular area might be a little bit challenging for small business, but it is very important that this gets done on a regular basis. And this might also be something that could be handled by something as simple as like a Norton utility suite that is loaded with antivirus, backup, and so on. That sometimes can be just enough to at least tip off an owner if something should be going in the wrong direction. So those are some things that we talk about with small business owners with regards to systems and information integrity. So those are the 6 domains contained within the CMMC model that we follow here at the SBDC to help protect small businesses. So when it comes down to it, though, how do we actually can translate that into best practices for small businesses? That's what we're going to talk about now. So the first thing we have to do is we have to determine what is it within a business that needs to be protected. So a small business owner is concerned with the operations of their business and the like, of course, but a lot of times you have to connect the dots as to what that means when it comes to the data that they use day in and day out. So their ability to operate and access the data that they need is something that we focus on. It may not seem like not having access to, say, your supplier data would be that big of a deal, but if you can't pick up the phone or place a PO, place an order with your supplier to get raw materials, the chances are your manufacturing facility won't be able to operate very long before you're out of raw goods. If you have a situation where maybe you have machines on the internet through your network, and that network is hacked and unable to communicate, your machines won't operate. So those types of connections with a small business owner sometimes escape them until you bring it to their attention. And that's one of the things that we focus on. So their ability to operate and access the data that they need to do their day-to-day operations is one thing that we want to protect. Of course, the reputation and the trust factor involved as a small business, they can't bounce back as easily from, say, a hacking incident. It's one thing for the pipeline company to say, yeah, we got hit with ransomware. We're doing this to fix it and so on. And the next day, they continue on in business. But a small business on Main and First, who ends up in the newspaper or on the news, 6 o'clock news for being hacked, they may not be able to bounce back for that. In fact, there's a very high percentage of small businesses who will fail so within short order after being the victim of a cyber attack. So that reputation thing is something else that we really work hard to help them protect. You see there, critical unclassified information, or CUI as it's sometimes referred to. Basically, these are things that they're not necessarily designated by any government entity as being secret, top secret, or anything like that, but it's information that if it were to be allowed to be distributed through the general public to become public knowledge, this is probably not a good situation. So when we refer to CUI or critical unclassified information, that would be all those things that maybe it's not regulated, but we certainly would rather it didn't become published, on the next CNN blog or something like that. So that kind of information needs to be identified, and certainly take some extra precautions to protect that. And then any kind of proprietary data or backups. So every business has certain data that, from a competitive standpoint, they need to protect that. And if they hold that type of data, there needs to be measures put in place to keep that from being accessed by those, say, coming across the internet, by clients that interact with their systems, and frankly, in many cases, even by some of the employees that work for them. So proprietary data is one area, and then backups. Backups that you're going to hear here in just a few minutes are one of the primary mitigating factors that we employ to protect small businesses in the event they get attacked. So obviously, if those backups themselves become corrupted or are inaccessible, that's a big problem. So protecting those backups is also a very large part of what we consult. So what are some of the vulnerabilities and some of the desirable data that are out there that make small businesses big targets? Well, one of the biggest vulnerabilities we see are unencrypted websites, unencrypted data traveling back and forth across networks, unchecked network access. Those are probably some of the biggest vulnerabilities. We're not monitoring who's coming and going. We're using routers that have factory default settings on them that have not been reconfigured at the time of installation. Those are types of things that probably are top of the list. And that would be number two, right below employees. People are the weakest link in this whole thing. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But some of the more desirable data that's out there, HR and payroll data obviously are very important, very highly sought after data by hackers. And also, if you work with young folks, if let's say you're a pediatric clinic and you have a lot of information on children in your systems, the younger demographic is highly sought after, mainly because they can exploit that data for a very long period of time before that individual reaches adulthood and then realizes that their identity was stolen when they were 5. So that if you have data on children in your systems, that is a very well sought after target there. Point of sale systems are more easy to hack because they've got a lot of interaction with a lot of different entities there. They do tend to have to be a little bit more open than some of the internal systems. So that's a high vulnerability point. Customer data that you have in your CRM systems, this is also a high target area as well. Inventory tracking, supplier data, vendor data. You might be surprised to know that knowing what inventory comes and goes at what times and at what volumes is very valuable data to certain entities out there. So while you might not think that protecting how many coats were sold off of the rack in a retail store is a big deal, to somebody out there, that's data worth paying for. And any data worth paying for is data worth stealing. So protecting that type of information is just as important as protecting, say, your payroll information. So if those are the vulnerabilities, then how do we go in and talk to a small business owner and say, hey, okay, here's some of the things that you need to do to protect against those vulnerabilities. Here's some of the data and where it's found. How do we do that? Well, we do some basic assessment, and we break that into people, places, and things. First one we focus on is people. As I just alluded to a few slides ago, people is create the weakest link of any security system. It's been said that if we could allow the machines to do this 100% from point to point, and we did not have any people involved with it whatsoever, then we wouldn't have to worry too much about cybersecurity. I don't know if that's a 100%, but certainly when we inject the human element into the data and the systems that we have, that does create quite a large link, weak link there. So we start at the top. We start with leadership, and we try to figure out, is leadership, one, aware? Are they interested to the point where they're going to create policies? Are they going to create an atmosphere that promotes good cyber hygiene? Are they going to be up to speed with what's going on? What are those threats out there specific to their business? What is that data that they need to work hard to protect? Are they going to employ some form of IT staff or some third party entity to help them with their cybersecurity? How are they going to go about that? If we speak to the leadership of the company and all of this is fuzzy to them, that's where we need to start first, is to make sure that they are on board, they understand the importance, because without that, the employees, if they don't see that at the top, they're not going to follow suit. So that leads then to the culture within the business. With good leadership, we can work on creating a culture where the rest of the folks within the organization understand that they need to be aware of what's going on in the world of cybersecurity. They have to maintain a certain level of vigilance and readiness. They have to understand the importance of things like access control and physical security and so on. They have to also feel like that they can report suspicious activity, and in many cases they need to be able to feel comfortable that they can report the fact that they messed up and they clicked on the wrong link, and they're not going to be instantly terminated because of that. But you know, that can make for long, difficult conversations with some of the employees sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, none of us are immune to this, and to create a culture where it is an instant negative impact on you as an individual by reporting such activity, that's not going to be productive in this battle against cybersecurity. So we have to maintain a certain amount of openness with leadership in our culture. Training is another big thing that we look at. How often are we training these employees? Do they know what basic cyber hygiene is? Do they know what some of the threats are? Do they know what the data is that needs to be protected? Those types of things. And then, of course, testing. If we're going to create that culture and we're going to lead by example and train the people up, then we need to make sure it's working. And simply doing some penetration testing on networking, maybe sending out some phishing samples to see how many people within the organization fall victim to it, testing our backups on a regular basis, all of those types of things can help empower our employees. It can help test our systems, and it can help us build a better, stronger culture and mitigate more risk through that people element anyway. Next thing we'll look at are the places. So the places and the things part they come back to those 6 domains that we were talking about that are within the CMMC framework, and you'll see some commonalities here. So when we talk about places, we do a check of the access. Are we maintaining lists of people who are coming and going, whether they're employees or not? People should be signing in and signing out when they come and go. Are we requiring our business partners, our vendors, our suppliers? Are we requiring them to follow the same policies in how they handle our data? Are we doing multi-factor authentication? Do we have password policies in place, social media policies in place, these types of things? So those are some of the things that we will ask a small business to show us that they have. Tracking, as I said just a moment ago, are we tracking who's coming and going in, not only in person, but also in the system? What kind of data is not being touched? What kind of data is being touched? Where is it going? Who's requesting those data, that data? Who's running reports on that data? That kind of information should be tracked, and I should be able to go back at any given point and see who accessed something, whether it was a building, whether it was a file, whether it was a computer system or a software package. I should be able to go back and see 3 months ago who accessed that particular item in the log files. So tracking is a big part of this. And then the network itself. I mentioned earlier about, are we protecting our network by, say, changing the configurations on our routers when we receive them, or any other piece of equipment for that matter, so that they're not factory defaults. If we're not using the proper settings, if we're not setting up filters, if we are not segregating the data on various levels of systems, then we are making it that much easier for a hacker to not only access the data, but exploit that data. And those are some of the questions that we would ask a small business. When you received your router, where did you put it? Is it secure? Okay, did you change the configuration of that router once you received it? Or did you just turn it on, and if it worked, great, we pressed on. Those are some of the things that we would check with regards to places. And then the third area of people, places, and things. When we talk about things, we talk about hardware and software. Do we have a complete inventory of all of the hardware and software that we have? This will help in tracking things down that might be missing. This will also help us audit what we have in the event of a needed upgrade or something having a known issue and requiring an update or a patch. Without an inventory, we don't know where all that is to fix it. So inventorying hardware and software is a big thing. Configurations, making sure that any kind of security that can be employed by default, either on hardware or software, is being used. And then making sure that we're removing any kind of software or hardware from our systems that is no longer needed. If you have apps on your mobile device, on your phone, that you're no longer using, those apps could fall out of support, and they're not being updated. And anything that's not updated runs the risk of allowing a gateway or a doorway for a hacker to find their way in. Most of the infiltrations that we see come in through an unpatched software problem that's been identified. So it's really our fault for not either removing that system if it was not being used, or making sure it's up to date as those patches come out. We also want to make sure that we're taking care of the other media, the paper, the storage devices. Do we have a bring your own device policy? Are our employees allowed to use their own devices? Again, this is very challenging because of the newer remote work situation that we have. How are our websites set up? What access do we allow from our website into our internal systems, things of that nature? All of those represent the area of things that we might check for a small business. All right, so now we get into talking about some of the common threats. Up to now, we've been talking about mitigating the risk and some of the areas to look into. So what are we protecting all those things from? What's the scary thing out there that's going to attack us, basically? We're going to talk a little bit about each of these that you see on the slide here. Malware is kind of the overarching umbrella term that we use to talk about all things bad that might attack your systems. They come in various forms, various names, but we're going to talk about just a few very common ones that we're seeing on the radar that most people are dealing with right now. When we talk about malware, it's usually something that's going to attack your system. It's going to affect it negatively. It's going to impact the ability to move data about. It might shut the systems down. They may assume a certain level of control of your systems through malware, whatever it may be. We'll talk about some of the specific ones here in a moment. They normally come in the form of a virus, or spyware, or a Trojan horse. So a virus, this is something it's specifically designed to damage or steal, change data, send emails without your knowing, take some low-level control of your machine maybe to run in the background. It is what it sounds like. It infects a system and has a certain impact on that system. Spyware, that is normally used as a gateway, a stepping stone to bigger things. Spyware allows a hacker to come in, listen in, so to speak, on the traffic that is coming and going across your machines, your devices, your network. And in many cases, it will record that information such that they can go back over that data and identify data strings that represent credit card numbers or social security numbers or something along those lines, passwords, logins, and the like. So that's what spyware typically does. And then Trojan horses, these are things that usually, this is malware that you have downloaded at some point. It remains idle maybe in the background. It's installed into a system. You may not instantly know that it is there. It will be triggered at a future time or through some other mechanism, be it time, be it some other upload or download or action of the user, and then it will launch additional malware or possibly additional processes in the background, making your systems at the very least slower, and in many cases might actually totally disable them. So these are the larger categories of malware that we typically see. Let's talk about some of the specific ones that we are hearing a lot about in the news, and they've actually been around for some time, but they're being used a little bit more widely these days. Ransomware. So ransomware, as I said, it's just another form of malware. But it has become much, much more dangerous than some of the other categories that we talked about. Typically on a ransomware attack, what happens is the hacker will somehow gain access to the administrative level of the systems that they're attacking. This then allows them to move about the network freely. They have full range, full capabilities within that system because they are an admin user at that point. They will usually steal very sensitive data, things that you would not want to be in the hands of anybody outside of your organization. They will delete any backups that they have so that you do not have the ability to easily recover from them shutting your systems down. They may encrypt your network systems so that you will not have the ability to use any kind of tools that you currently have to fight this off, because they will have that encrypted. And once that occurs, that's usually at the point where you get the lockdown notice that you can no longer use your systems, basically. and they will then wait. They will wait for that victim to contact them through the instructions that they have provided. In many cases, they have a customer service line that you can contact, believe it or not. And they can then arrange for some form of payment to then release your systems back to you, provide you with a decryption key or something along those lines. And of course, if you do not comply, you run the risk of never gaining access to your systems again, and or possibly having that information released to the general public, the dark web, wherever it may be most valuable. That's typically how ransomware works. It works the same whether you're a very large company or you're just a small shop in downtown Greenville. It's equally devastating. But for small businesses, it can be it can end the life of the business. So in many cases, we see that occur. So it's very, very important that we educate small business owners on what ransomware is and how to prevent that. We'll talk about some of those mitigating factors here in a moment. The next thing that you typically hear with regard that is very closely related to ransomware is phishing. There's various forms of phishing. Many of them we have on the slide here in front of you. I'll just briefly cover each of these so that you understand when you hear the term what it means. But phishing in general just means that someone has exploited the human link in this, and they have been able to attack them in such a way that they can now gain access to a system and have their way with the system because the individual, the victim of the phishing, has provided the information that they need. You've seen some of these. You hopefully have not fallen victim to these, but some of the more common ways. Email phishing is probably the most common attack. You just simply get an email, and that email is trying to get you to click on a link or download a file or something along those lines so that the system can be infected. You may do this unknowingly. It may be an email that looks like it came from somebody you know or someone within your organization, but it's not. And the download ends up opening the door basically for ransomware. Spear phishing, that gets to be a little bit more complex because what happens there is not only are they coming at you with an email, they're coming at you with some personal information that makes it look even more legitimate. Maybe they call you by your first name. Maybe they refer to a conversation you had with somebody within your business or some relationship that you have with another supplier or something along those lines. So it looks that much more legitimate. Whaling means that they're basically using spear phishing, but they're going after those higher up the ladder within a company. Typically, that's the CEO or the chief financial officer of the business. If they can identify them, which typically is very easy to do because those individuals have listed themselves on LinkedIn saying that, yes, I'm the CFO of XYZ company. So now they have their target and they can use spear phishing and email phishing to try and gain access to those individuals. Smishing is just a form of these other three, but it's using your text messaging, and vishing is using voice tools to do the same thing as well. They're calling you up saying, yeah, I'm the IRS or I'm Microsoft support, and we need to get into your systems. Can you log in with your information and so on? And next thing you know, you have opened the door for the hacker. So phishing, just remember, phishing is kind of that gateway that allows that administrative access that then results in something like ransomware or some form of malware that we just talked about. And then complacency is probably one of the more aggravating things that we see that is a cause of heartburn for our businesses. They just simply think, I'm a small business, I'm not a big target, I don't need to worry about it. So being complacent is a huge risk out there. So some of what we've talked about with regards to the people and them thinking, I'm not that target, I'm not that important, so therefore I don't have to do anything. Please make sure you or those that you're working with understand the fact that yes, you are a target. You're a softer target. It's much easier to gain access to your systems than it would be, say, a larger corporation who has in-house capabilities to fend off these attacks. Simply hoping for the best is not a good strategy. Making sure that you're taking a second, take a breath. If that email seems like it's probably not quite right, then it's probably not quite right. Pause, take a breath, read the email, set it aside, reread the email, make sure that you know what points to look for. That goes back to that training aspect of the folks we talked about earlier. And we can sit down with a client and tell them, okay, here's some of the things that you need to check every time an email comes in that you think might be a little fishy, so to speak. And then one of the things that we hear a lot from our small business clients is they assume this is very complicated, it's very expensive. But the fact of the matter is, all of the pointers, the frameworks, the CMMC model, everything that gets you to what we consider basic cyber awareness is all process and culture. It's not buying equipment. It's not installing major software systems. It's not hiring third-party companies. You certainly can do all of those, but the vast majority, I'd say 90% of everything that would get a company to CMMC level 1 compliance would be, and that's basic cyber awareness. That would just simply be making sure everybody's aware, trained, and we've done some of the simple basic things that we've talked about in today's slides. It's not a lot of money. It's not that complicated. So we have to get that word out to our small businesses and make sure that they understand that. Of course, there's always going to be unknowns. You don't know where the next attack's going to come from, when it's going to occur. These attacks are becoming more complex and certainly more creative daily. Just make sure that you're trying to stay up with it as best you can. Make sure you're in touch with your people. People do make mistakes. People get replaced. You're going to have to retrain folks. And frankly, people get angry. They can cause problems and heartburns for a business. So make sure you're staying on top of that. Make sure that your hardware and your software is not outdated, that you're removing the old stuff, that you're updating the existing things that you use on a regular basis. And just stay on top of the news and who's doing what out there. Some of the simple mitigation factors that you can employ: backups. Again, this is not an expensive fix. This is something that most companies can employ, run in the background, many times can run hands off. So simple tools are available. Things like antivirus software packages typically have some form of a backup utility attached. So running those backups, making sure they're stored in a safe location. Make sure we have backups that are not on the system that is probably targeted by hackers. Remove those backups from those systems. And then test those backups and make sure that they work. Backup doesn't do you any good if you go to restore from that backup and it doesn't work. So make sure that those are tested. We talked about multi-factor authentication using passphrases. Notice it says passphrases, not passwords. Passphrases are much longer, typically 3 words or more. So a good, strong passphrase policy should be put in place. Using virtual private networks, VPNs, and encryption anytime you're out and about. Make sure that you've instructed your employees not to just drop into any Wi-Fi available location, fire up the laptop, join into a conversation or check email or whatever without first installing or going through a VPN. That will save you a lot of vulnerability. Installing anti-malware, doing regular scans. You should be scanning all of your systems at various levels. You should be doing, partial scans, maybe daily, weekly. You should be doing full system scans at minimum weekly. You should be doing real-time scans on downloads, things that have come across email, files that are coming at you from various sources. Those should be scanned before they hit the system. So there's different ways that you can go about that. Again, all implemented through software. Many packages out there that don't cost much at all can do this for you. And making sure your patches and your updates stay up to date. Train the employees. Make sure that if they get a message saying, "Hey, your Windows needs to do an update," or your Norton antivirus is out of date, they need to check and make sure that that one is legitimate. Two, if it is, get that done in a timely manner, because that represents one of the easiest way for hackers to make their way in is an outdated software package. So you've gotten a lot of information today, and I wanted to let you know that there are many resources available to you through the SBDC. We have one-page guidelines that you can use. You see some examples of them there. We have some videos available for training purposes. Of course, there's one-on-one consultations. We do assessments with small businesses, very simple, not techie. So do take advantage of that. Reach out to any of our offices. Chances are, if it's South Carolina, you're going to get referred back to me. But I'm the chair. I'm the chair of the technology committee, and there's about 6 of us on that can work with anybody on some of these assessments. So do take advantage of that. And of course, we do utilize materials from some of the partner organizations out there that I've talked about: NIST, FTC, CMMC, and so on. So all of those are available as well. And we usually can translate those pretty easily into small business speak as needed. So with that, I know we've got about 5 minutes left. I open it up for questions and comments. My contact information there on the screen. Should you need or want to contact me after the fact, you're welcome to do that as well. So do we have any questions or comments at this point?
All right, you guys can go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A or into the chat. And we do have one question from someone on the phone. They said, "What is your advice for getting insurance for cyber attacks?"
That's a great question, actually. So insurance comes in basically 2 forms for anything related to cyber attacks. You have one that protects you and your data against being attacked, and then you have another type of insurance that protects you from being involved in someone else being attacked. So if you're a small business and you work with someone else's data, you may need that third-party cybersecurity insurance. But if you're looking to insure yourself and your data against attack, that would be first-party cybersecurity insurance. Most of your major carriers do have some form of cybersecurity insurance these days. You may have to get a little bit more specialized depending upon the amount of data, the type of data, and the amount of risk involved. But please read the fine print on these. I have done some comparisons for some companies, and frankly, what they were signing up for was not much coverage at all. And the gotchas in there about, well, if you didn't do this, you didn't do that, we don't cover you, are quite significant. So you have to be able to show that you're making an effort, that you've done your part to protect that data before you're likely to see a payout from an insurance claim.
That's really interesting. Yeah, very good to know, actually. Are there any other questions? I think we have one more. I see someone's typing. One in the chat. Do you suggest to use business email for other communications?
Yeah, so I assume what you're saying is, should we use business email if we're going to email our friends to arrange for the party this weekend at the lake or something? You probably should not, you don't want to distribute a business email address any further than it really should. Plus, it makes it easier on your end to be able to discern what is legitimate email traffic and what is not. So, if you send it to Joe or Susie to arrange for the cookout this weekend, and Susie or Joe gets hacked next week, well, now your business email is now a part of that, and it's going to be hard for you to say, oh, that's just an email from Joe, I'll go ahead and open that up, right? And you do, and not knowing that Joe was hacked. So yeah, I would kind of protect the use of that, keep it business.
Right. Yeah, I feel like there's quite a bit that can go wrong with that. Anyone else? I'll give it another couple seconds. Well, if anyone else does have questions, Earl's contact info is right there. Feel free to shoot him an email, and we will be making this recording available after the webinar. I'll probably send it out sometime tomorrow or Friday. But Earl, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. This was really helpful and informational.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I very much enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of our attendees. We appreciate that as well. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us, and we look forward to doing another webinar with you guys soon.
All right. Thank you. See you
later. Thank you all.
later.
Have a good one. Bye, everyone.